What's happening? Thanks for joining me on this Tuesday morning. It is very much appreciated. We'll get to the Eastern Conference Finals, Celtics-Pacers, which begins tonight at the TD Garden. We will get to that a little bit later on in the podcast, but we start with the Patriots news, and we start with Cole Strange. Now, we expected that Strange was going to miss some of camp, if not most of camp. We even said he might miss the beginning of the season, right? None of us felt great about his health, but we weren't 100% sure how long he was going to miss. Well, we have more intelligence today from Ian Rappaport of the NFL Network. Ian posted, Strange, who is still dealing with a significant knee injury suffered late last season, is expected to miss the start of the season and may be out until the middle of the season, sources say. So he is expected to miss the start of the year. He might miss all the way up until the middle of the season. So we're talking week 8, week 9-ish. This was not as much of a surprise as it could have been because of what Drake Maye said yesterday on Cole Strange with the media. Mike Reese posted this. He transcribed it. Here's what Mayo said about Strange. That's an interesting one. He's another guy. Normally, we'd say day by day. He's more of a week by week, or you could go month by month if you want to. He is working hard. He's doing his rehab. He's here every day. He's in the meeting room. So I'm happy where he is. Now that screams, right? That screams all of this information from Ian Rappaport and what Drake Maye said yesterday. It screams to me, and it should scream to you, that Cole Strange is going to be put on the PUP list. I 100% anticipate Strange being put on the PUP, which means he would have to miss at least the first 4 games of the season. I would not be surprised if that move is made. This also makes a lot of sense when you look back at the Patriots draft. One of the picks that I had an issue with, and I gave it a C- at the time, I do believe, was the Layden Robinson pick. And I asked, why would you draft a guard at the top of the 4th round when you drafted a guard with a first-round pick a couple of years ago? You drafted 3 or 4 interior offensive linemen back in the 2023 draft. Why would you invest such an asset, a top of the 4th round pick, on an offensive guard when you invested so much? You also signed Nick Leverett during the offseason. Why would you do that? Now, at the time, I also mentioned a caveat, and the caveat was this. If Cole Strange is not healthy, it makes a lot more sense. Here we are. Strange is not healthy. That Robinson pick makes a lot more sense in the big picture. The Patriots looked at this and said, Cole Strange is not going to be ready. And even if/when he is ready, he might not even be a scheme fit. So we have to draft another guard. Why do we have to draft another guard? Because Jake Andrews is seen more as a center prospect, not necessarily a guard. Because Antonio Mafe is seen as still a project because he played defensive line for so many years before moving to the opposite side of the line of scrimmage. So when you really looked at this depth, you're moving Michael Wenu to tackle. Strange is hurt. Mafe is a question mark. Andrews is more center than guard. So the guards on this roster that you could feel good about, Sidy Sow and maybe Leverett, who you signed to that 1-year deal. So drafting Robinson now, where they drafted him, makes much more sense in the grand scheme of things. When you look at this roster, they needed interior offensive line depth. They needed help at that position. Once they made up their mind that Onwenu was flipping from guard to tackle, that meant you needed at least one more body and one more person that you could develop and that could help the future of your team, because Leverett's on that 1-year deal. So you needed that depth. You needed to draft an interior offensive lineman back in April. So it makes much more sense. Now, as far as where this offensive line is right now, at OTAs yesterday, you had Chuks Okorafor at left tackle. You had Sidy Sow at left guard, which is interesting. Sow, of course, played right guard last year. He's playing left guard at OTAs yesterday. David Andrews, as we expected, at center. You look at Leverett, who was playing right guard. So Nick Leverett was on that starting offensive line yesterday. and Michael Wenu was your right tackle. So you went Okorafor, So, David Andrews, Leverett, and Owenu. Couple questions. Okorafor seems to be your left tackle one right now. Of course, we're going to have questions about him and his transition from the right side to the left side all preseason long. And Okorafor spoke with the media yesterday, and he was honest. He told everybody, this is not going to be easy. I've played on the right side my entire NFL career. I believe I can do it, but it's going to take time. So Okorafor is your left tackle. We have questions there. Then you look at left guard. Fascinating that they decided to move So from the right side to the left side. Now, my guess is that's because they feel like Leverett will be better on the right side than the left side. They feel like So can make that transition without much of an issue. And maybe, just maybe, they believe that So is better than Leverett. So they put So on the left side because you still have that question mark at left tackle. And if you put Leverett on the right side, Owenu might be able to make up some of that, especially in the run game with his presence. Now, of course, it also begs the question, Owenu is playing right tackle for the first time full-time in his NFL career. So maybe they want the vet on the right side to play with Owenu because Owenu is still making that full-time transition. So there's a lot of mixing and matching. I'm surprised. And again, it's the first day of OTAs, so we don't know if this is going to be the strict, no doubt about it, offensive line on day one, right? We have to acknowledge that they could still make more changes. Day one of OTAs is not necessarily the gospel. It's not written in stone. So when you look at this offensive line, there could be plenty of shuffling left. But going off of what they did yesterday, it's fascinating because you have Okorafor playing left tackle for the first time in his NFL career. You have Sidy So, who was a right guard last year, changing positions and going to the left side. You've got Leverett at right guard, and you have Owenu for the first time, full-time, being right tackle instead of going into a season being the right guard. So you could argue that at least 3 of the 5 offensive line positions here are going through some shuffling and will have to have a significant to somewhat significant transition. So there's a lot going on in front of the quarterback right now. Again, it's OTAs, so maybe by the time you get to camp, by the time you get to mandatory minicamp in about a month, you will have more of this settled, and we know what this offensive line looks like, and maybe, just maybe, it'll be, quote-unquote, solidified at that point. The other part of yesterday, which is interesting, is that Vidarian Lowe was at left tackle behind Okorafor and not Caden Wallace. Now, again, we can sit here and we can say first day of OTAs. And yesterday was very veteran heavy, even at the quarterback position, which we'll talk about in a couple of minutes. The quarterback rotation, very veteran heavy. Drake Maye was QB3 yesterday at OTAs. So I would not necessarily rush to judgment and say that Caden Wallace is not going to be your backup left tackle. Caden Wallace might end up being your starting left tackle. We don't know. But starting OTAs yesterday, it was let's put the veterans up front. So Okorafor was number 1 at left tackle. It was Lowe as number 2 and Wallace as number 3. That could change as early as today. Wallace might be out there behind Okorafor today. He might be in front of Okorafor today. We don't know, and we won't know unless the Patriots release some pictures on social media from today's practices, but you still don't know the rotations. The media will not be allowed to witness OTAs until May 29th. So what? A week from tomorrow. Yesterday was their first shot. The next shot for the media is a week from tomorrow. So all of this can change. All of this can shuffle. I'm just updating you on what it looked like yesterday. So it was Okorafor, Vidarian Lowe, and then Caden Wallace. This could be just slowly rolling out Caden Wallace at left tackle, which would make sense. He played right tackle in college. He's making that transition to the left side. Not necessarily want to throw him in the deep end right off the bat. So that would make some sense. So at left guard, again, interesting. Is that where he's going to stay? We'll have to see. Leverett at right guard, same thing. Maybe they want that steady vet next to Owenu. Maybe they want So next to the left tackle because they're not necessarily sold on the left tackle just yet. So they want some insurance on that side of the line. Maybe they look at the O-line and they say that Onwenu and So are their two best offensive linemen, so have one on each side of the offensive line. We won't know. We won't know if that's going to be how they line up to kick off the season, and we won't know why they're doing that unless Gerard Mayo wants to tell us, or Scott Peters, or Alex Van Pelt. But a City So Chukwuekorafo for left side will certainly, I think, bring some concern until we see it actually happen and play out in front of our eyes. Okorafor, we don't know much about at left tackle. He played there at college, still unknown at this level. And So moving from right to left, we'll see how he deals with that. Calvin Anderson, meanwhile, another name that we've mentioned here, he was right tackle 2 yesterday. So he was behind Mike Onwenu in the rotation at right tackle, which would tell me that the Patriots are fully invested in Caden Wallace at left tackle, because Wallace is not even bothering on the right side as far as what we saw first day of OTAs. Wallace is strictly left side. They have Anderson working right side behind Mike Onwenu. Another interesting tidbit before we move to quarterbacks and some other notes from OTAs yesterday. Antonio Mafe was all over the interior offensive line. Now, you can take that a couple of ways. You can look at Mafe and you can say, maybe, just maybe, he's ahead of the program. Maybe he's ahead of the curve, and they believe they're going to get something out of him this year. So he is going to be the security blanket, the depth on the interior offensive line. So he's cross-training at all these positions, left guard, even center. He played some center yesterday. Left guard, center, right guard. So maybe that's what they're working on. Or you could say they have no idea what Mafe brings to the table just yet. And the offensive line coaches, Kugler and Peters, want to see him do work at all 3 positions on the interior, so then they can pick a lane and develop him in that lane. David Andrews, of course, as we know, older guy, just signed the extension through 2025. Maybe they're trying Mafe there at center because they're not necessarily in love with Jake Andrews, and they say to themselves, hey, by 2026, we're going to need somebody there. And if we could work on developing Antonio Mafe as a center the next year and a half, 2 years, then he might be ready to be the guy in that position in 2026. So a lot of cross-training with Mafe. Overall, I just think they want a flexible offensive line. They don't want to be stuck at a position where they have only one guy or 2 guys to play one position moving forward. If Okorafor goes down, they want Vidarian Lowe and Caden Wallace to be options on the left side. If Onwenu goes down at right tackle, they have Calvin Anderson on the right side, maybe Tyrone Wheatley Jr. Maybe you stick Wallace back on the right side if need be. Center, you could have David Andrews, Jake Andrews, and you're training and working with Mafe as a possible third guy at center. And your guards, you want to make interchangeable, it seems like, right? So on the left side, and you've got Leverett on the right side. They may be able to swap places. You've got Mafe working at all 3 interior offensive line positions just in case. And of course, you draft Robinson as somebody who played right guard at college, but maybe you try him at left guard every once in a while. So I think they just want more depth and flexibility on that offensive line than they've had in the past. All right, before we continue and move forward with the OTA takeaways, including the quarterback position and Drake Maye, don't forget to give us that that thumbs up on the YouTube channel if you love the content that we do. Even if you like the content, you want that alternative, give us that thumbs up. The likes always mean a lot to us. Subscribe as well. Trying to get to 3,500 subscriptions, hopefully by mandatory minicamp. We can do that by you liking, by commenting, and subscribing. And, of course, the Spotify, Apple Pods crew, you can rate and review. Before I get to OTA takeaways, let's jump into the Super Chats after the Huddle sends a $5 Super Chat. Thank you, ATH. Post-June 1st cut players are approaching. Is there any love for another cornerback besides Gilmore? Isn't Xavier Howard on the market? Yes, Xavier Howard is on the market. He's still out there. Gilmore is still out there. I think I've said this a couple times, and I'm going to stand by it. I think the Patriots want to see what they have in the young outside corners before they make any decision about bringing in somebody, who is the veteran guy in his 30s, late 20s. I think they want to see if they can get something from Alex Austin. I think they want to see if Isaiah Bolden comes back from that injury that we all remember during the preseason last year and how he looks. Marco Wilson's another guy that they bring in. They've got a number of different guys that they can at least try at outside cornerback too. And if they're not in love with what they see, if none of those young guys, you can even include Marcellus Dial, the 6th-round pick this year, if they don't love what they see from one of those young corners, they could either stick with Jonathan Jones and say the young guys didn't take Jonathan Jones's spot, or they can go out there and say, we really want to move Jones into the slot because maybe Marcus Jones is not winning them over in the slot. Maybe, just maybe, they want to move Jonathan Jones back to free safety because they're not necessarily in love with what they have back there. And then they start to look at the market because Austin, Bolden, Dial, Wilson, none of those guys stood out to them. So they go back and they say, all right, let's see what's on the veteran free agency market. We're at the point now also, ATH, that I think when we look at all of these veteran guys that are still available, there's really no rush to sign any of them. They haven't been signed for a reason. So I think teams are in this spot right now post-draft. Let's see what we have at OTAs. Maybe even let's see what we have at mandatory minicamp. And if we have to pull the trigger on a veteran, that's when we'll pull the trigger. It doesn't seem like there's any urgency. So Gilmore's still out there. Howard is still out there. And you mentioned left tackle. There are still a number of guys that play left tackle that are still on the market. Charles Leno, I've brought up a lot on this show. He's still available. DJ Humphries is still available. Donovan Smith is still available. So there are still veteran left tackles on the market. I just think a lot of these teams want to see if they can make it without having to add one of those older guys. And so we're kind of in, I believe, a neutral position right now. We're going to see how all of these guys perform at OTAs, maybe even mandatory minicamp. And then if you feel like you've got to adjust, then you can adjust. Also, let's not forget, as you mentioned, the June 1st cut line, teams are also waiting to see who gets cut. These decisions are made as the summer rolls on. So maybe, just maybe, the Patriots think that a left tackle might be cut from somebody that they might like more than who's on the market right now. So maybe they make a move at that point. Maybe a cornerback gets cut on June 1st or shortly thereafter that they think might be better than Gilmore or Howard or even J.C. Jackson, who's still out there. Maybe they're just waiting until that cut deadline comes there and they see who's available, and they might like somebody more at that spot that's cut versus who's available right now. So what I think what you see right now is a lot of teams are just settled. They're going to wait. They're going to go through OTAs. They're going to see the June 1st cuts, who's available at that point, which free agents are still available. Then you go into mandatory minicamp if you'd like, see how your young guys are performing at that point. Do you feel like you have enough depth to address all of these positions? And if you do, then you're not worried about it. But if you're at the beginning of mandatory minicamp and you still have some question marks, then you start to look at the free agency market because you have the guys who were cut on June 1st added to that market. So it's deeper. So I don't think any teams really have urgency right now to go out and sign anybody. It's not to say that they're not talking. They might be talking to some of these guys, but I don't think they feel like it's a must right now, because if they did, some of those guys would already be in camp. If they felt like they had to add to corner, they'd be talking to Gilmore. They'd be talking to Howard. If they felt that they had to add at left tackle, they'd be talking to one of those vets I mentioned. So it might happen in the next week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, maybe next month, again, when we get to that mandatory minicamp. But as of right now, I think they're chill. All right, let's get to some more OTA takeaways. We'll get to that in a minute. Before I do, want to remind you that we're brought to you by Warzone Paintball and Airsoft in North Kingston, Rhode Island. Those guys do a great job out there in North Kingston. If you're into, any kind of trench warfare, if you like to mess around with paintball, airsoft, ages 6+, swing on by Warzone Paintball and Airsoft in North Kingston, Rhode Island. They will take care of you. It's casual. It's low-key. They have a great staff. Show up. Even if you haven't played before, they will take care of you. The rules are set so newcomers can deal with some of the unknowns of of paintball and airsoft. Swing on by. Again, it's Warzone Paintball and Airsoft. Jeans, good shoes, long sleeve shirt, and they will handle the rest. Give them a call at 401-228-6366, 401-228-6366. Tell them that the Nick Cattle Show sent you. Again, it's Warzone Paintball and Airsoft helping us, sponsoring this program financially, contributing to this show, allows us to keep going. I can't say enough about those guys and their belief in this program. So thanks to Warzone Paintball and Airsoft, and check them out if you want to have some fun this summer. All right, so Patriots OTA takeaways. A quarterback rotation. Yesterday was Jacoby Brissett, Bailey Zappi, Drake Maye, Joe Milton. I saw some people that I appreciate in this business, including, Phil Perry and Evan Lazar. Those guys were a little bit perturbed that Zappi was getting more snaps than Drake Maye. I'm not worried about it. I'm not worried one iota about this. It's the first day of OTAs. What I'm going to try to do on this podcast over the next few months is not overreact. And I'm not saying that Phil and Evan are overreacting, because they couched their comments as well. I am not going to overreact about anything that we see at OTAs. I'm going to try to not even overreact to some of the things that we see at mandatory minicamp. This is a younger team. You have a lot of turnover on offense. You have a new offensive coaching staff. You have a rookie head coach. I'm going to give this staff and I'm going to give these young players some time. I'm trying to be as patient as I can be through this summer, and I hope many of you are with me. I'm not going to lose my mind or be concerned or be freaking out or even question Bailey Zappi being the second quarterback in the rotation yesterday on day one of OTAs. It was veteran heavy, as I've mentioned a couple of times. Just because Vidarian Lowe is in front of Caden Wallace in the rotation at left tackle doesn't mean that today Caden Wallace is still behind Vidarian Lowe in the rotation at left tackle. Just because Drake Maye was third in the rotation yesterday at quarterback doesn't mean he's third in the rotation at quarterback today. Gerard Mayo said as much. He said they're going to be changing some things around. It's a day-to-day situation. So I'm not really worried or concerned. I don't think you're, taking significant snaps away from Drake Maye on May 20th, right? I don't think that's what's happening here. If we are worried about this guy May 20th, then I don't even want to see what people are thinking in July. So we've got to take this slowly. They are slowly rolling out Drake Maye. They are, with incredible intensity, working on his footwork, working on his mechanics. We've said this before. I'll say it again. They're starting really from ground zero, and they're building up Drake Maye's foundation. That's what they're doing. And so him starting third in the rotation and first day of OTAs, that's not alarming to me. I have no concern about how they're handling him. They want to slowly bring him along. They want him to earn the quarterback 2 job, which he might do by tomorrow. If not, he already did today. They want to have him have a little bit of a competition, get that QB2 gig, and then when you get into mandatory minicamp, when you start to slowly get towards camp itself, then he's in position. His foundation has been built. He's earned the second job, and now he is ready to battle mano a mano against Jacoby Brissett to try to be the starting quarterback week 1 of 2024. That's how I see all of this playing out. It is a gradual progression from being third in the rotation to eventually overtaking Zappi in the next week or two. Then you get to mandatory minicamp, and you have Brissett versus Maye begin. And Brissett will likely hold the title going into camp, and then you see if Maye can take away that title of QB1 from Brissett in July going into August as we watch the preseason play out. That's how I see all of this happening. Makes a lot of sense to me. So I'm not alarmed by anything. Something else that stood out to me regarding Drake Maye was what Mayo said yesterday about him. Quote, "Yeah, I thought Drake did a great job not only progressing on the field, but also off the field. You can already tell like he is going to put in that extra work. I walked by the quarterback meeting room. He's just in there by himself, watching film. Those are the things that you want to see. I'm excited to see his growth going forward. Drake Maye sitting in the quarterback room, in the film room, late at night by himself, doesn't mean he's going to be a success. Doesn't guarantee that he's going to reach his ceiling. Let's first put that out there. However, what it does mean is that they drafted a guy who is taking his craft seriously. There was a video yesterday from NBC Sports Boston that I thought was great. It was on X, and it was Jacoby Brissett and Maye going back and forth with the conversation. It looked like Maye was asking Brissett questions, and Brissett was kind of explaining certain things to him on the field. That's what you want to see. Brissett said last week that Drake Maye continues to text him about the nuances of the offense, the cadence, and all of that. This is what you want. You want somebody who takes the job seriously, who was doing all the work behind the scenes, gets on the field, consistently works on the fundamentals that he needs to work on, communicating with the veteran quarterbacks to figure out, hey, what do I do in this situation? What's the cadence within this offense at this certain point? Of course, Brissett, he has experience with Van Pelt's offense from the Cleveland days back in 2022. So pick the brain of Brissett. Work your tuchus off. Be in that film room late at night taking notes. Because here's the thing. If you have the talent that Maye has, and Maye, we talked a lot about him, of course, over the last few months, and we'll talk even more about him hopefully the next 10 years. But when you have the kind of raw talent that Drake Maye has, he possesses that raw, natural ability. He can do things naturally that other quarterbacks can't do naturally. When you mix, when you combine that kind of work ethic with that kind of raw, natural talent, that's the special sauce. I'm not telling you again that he's going to be incredible. I'm high on Maye. I wanted them to draft him at 3. As all of you know, if you're joining me for the first time, you haven't heard me discuss it, I wanted Maye going back to my first mock draft a couple of months before the draft. I stood by that. I am optimistic about Drake Maye's future, but I can't guarantee you he's going to work out. But what I can tell you is a guy with that kind of natural talent that's putting in that kind of work, he cares and he wants to be really good. He wants to be great. And that's all you can ask. All you can ask from Maye is for him to put in the work. If he's putting in the work and the results don't follow, he just wasn't cut out to be the guy. But if he's giving that effort, if he's giving you that work ethic, if he's pouring through the film, if he's asking all the necessary questions, if he's communicating like with teammates like we've seen, if he's doing all of that and he continues to do all of that when the cameras are off, that's all that you can ask from your number 3 pick. We all should want him to put everything into this. And it certainly seems so far that's exactly what he's doing. And that's when you get that special sauce, when you combine that work ethic with that natural talent. Maye also stood behind his wide receivers at practice, communicating with those guys consistently. And he also stayed on the practice field up to 15 minutes after the OTA practice was done yesterday. And the practice went, I think, over 2 hours, pretty long practice. Maye stayed after practice with both Javon Baker and Jalen Polk. And I just thought it was really cool to see that. Again, it's not guaranteeing anything, but I think it's exciting. It's exciting to see the 2 young receivers that you drafted with the future of this franchise at quarterback, those guys working together, talking, going through certain things after practice, because that's the future of this team. If you hit on those 3 guys, this offense is going to be damn good by 2025. Hopefully sooner than that, but again, you got to give it time and be patient. So I thought it was really cool to see Polk, Baker, and Maye stay after practice, work on things, Maye working on routes with the young receivers, building that chemistry. It's important. Moving on to the wide receiver room, Juju Smith-Schuster said that last year he was 60% at this time, and he feels much better now, feels 100% right now. And I'm not going to go too crazy because we have to see it to believe it. We've got to see Juju get through a preseason and all of that stuff. But I'm fine waiting on Juju. I'm fine waiting to see if he is healthy. A healthy Juju Smith-Schuster is a good NFL receiver. A healthy Juju Smith-Schuster helps you. He can help you in multiple ways. He can help you by staying on this roster if he does prove that he's healthy. If you get 90% of what Juju was at Kansas City, he's arguably what? Your second best receiver on this team right now? Maybe third? So I don't have any kind of rush to cut Juju. It's not my money. It's Kraft's money. I'm not worried about it. Let's have this play out. Let's have a competition. I mentioned this during the offensive depth chart conversation, right? Competition's great. You don't have to be in a rush right now to cut Juju Smith-Schuster. If he feels healthy and he looks more healthy than he looked last year, throw him into the wide receiver room and see if he can outplay some of these guys. I mean, Javon Baker's making the team. Polk is making the team. Pop Douglas is making the team. Kendrick Bourne is making the team. But maybe Juju pushes Tyquan Thornton. Maybe Tyquan Thornton pushes Juju. Maybe KJ Osborne pushes all those guys. I like competition. So allow that competition to come out. I mean, to me, right now, the only guys that I'm pretty certain that will be out there day one, Pop Douglas and Jalen Polk. I think both of those guys will play significant snaps right off the bat. Baker, we'll see. Juju, we'll see if he's on the team. Tyquan, does he figure it out? KJ Osborne, does he solidify himself? I think KJ could leapfrog both of those guys if he has a good camp. But he had a couple of drops yesterday. And we'll see how he transitions to New England and how he transitions to being somebody who is, either a wide receiver 1-2 on a team versus what he was in Minnesota when he had Justin Jefferson, and last year he had Jefferson and Addison, and you've got TJ Hockenson, et cetera, et cetera. But I have no issue holding on to Juju, hoping that he's healthy, and have him battle Tyquan Thornton, Jalen Reagor, KJ Osborne, and every other wide receiver in that room. Because even if Juju, let's put it this way, if Juju has a good camp, but he gets beaten out by the other guys, that's good news for the Patriots. They might be able to trade Juju later in the offseason, right? Later on, let's say in July during training camp, maybe they could actually trade Juju at that point and get a late round pick for him. So let him build his value. I mean, the worst thing, what can happen? You cut him. You can cut him now. You can cut him in July. Why are we in a rush? I understand. It was frustrating to watch him last year. But why are we in a rush now? See how he works. Maybe he works his butt off. He wants to prove it to the team. He wants to prove it to the other guys in the wide receiver room. Maybe he ends up being solid. And if he ends up being solid, he's a good option for you, especially if you're putting Kendrick Bourne on the PUP, and we'll talk about Bourne in a little bit. But if you're putting Kendrick Bourne on the PUP, then keeping Juju around is not a bad idea. Again, if he looks healthy, if he looks like a guy that could be 85, 90% of what he was in Kansas City. So I don't hate it at all. Keep him around, have a competition, see what happens. Maybe he earns a spot on the team. Maybe he builds his value and you can trade him in July. Not an issue whatsoever. Derek Irish sends a $2 super chat. Did you see the Devontae Parker retirement? Yes, I did. And I tweeted out at Nick C Radio yesterday. That will go down as one of those Bill Belichick moves that I'll never understand. And people are still just like broken by the Belichick thing. Like every time I post something questioning a personnel move offensively that Belichick made, people are like, yeah, but he won 6 Super Bowls. I don't understand that. I don't get it. He certainly wasn't flawless. This offense was set up to be a disaster. They had to have so much turnover on this roster offensively because they had so many missing pieces. I mean, deciding to give Devontae Parker the extension because you brought DeAndre Hopkins in and Parker was upset by that, and you decided not to sign DeAndre Hopkins, it's one of those decisions to go along with many others, especially on the offensive side of the ball, that I didn't understand. I did not understand it in the moment. I don't understand it to this very day. But good luck to Devontae Parker. He's got kids, got a family. Hopefully he enjoys his retirement. All right, let's get to attendance. Don't forget to give us that like. Give us that thumbs up as you watch. Getting those thumbs, those likes, that's how we beat the YouTube algorithm. So give us those likes, subscribe, comment as well, rate and review on Spotify and Apple Pods. All right, attendance. Noteworthy ATOs yesterday. The injuries, the contract holdouts. Evan Lazar posted that the Patriots that were absent yesterday, Matthew Judon, Anthony Jennings, Jelani Tavai, Joshua Uche, Zuri Henry, Cole Strange, Kendrick Bourne, and Devon Gottschall. Now, we know more about Strange as we went over earlier. Judon's interesting. We've talked a lot about Matthew Judon this offseason and his contract situation. Are they going to give him an extension? Are they going to work with him in a way like they worked with him last year? Give him a bump for 2024, but not necessarily add years onto his deal. Are they going to tack on a year and then a couple of, dummy years to make him happy? He is woefully underpaid when you look at what he's going to make this year. Woefully underpaid. He's a top 15 pass rusher in the NFL when he's healthy. It's interesting because Judon certainly has a case with the money he's set to make. The Patriots have a case because he's in his 30s coming off of a torn bicep. So can they meet in the middle? Can they make something work? Can they make a contract work and each side understand the circumstances they're dealing with? Judon, we love you, but you're 32, whatever it is, coming off of a torn bicep. Judon could say, yeah, but you got to bump me because even coming off of a torn bicep, I'm a top 15 pass rusher in the league. So something to keep an eye on. I would not be alarmed. Judon has missed OTAs before, even with the contract. So we'll see how this unfolds. They might even be talking to him right now about a contract. We'll see what happens. Just something to keep in the back of our minds. Gottschall is in the last year of his deal. He is making good money this year. I don't think this is a holdout, so to speak, or a hold-in, whatever you want to call it. We'll see if Gottschall is back for the rest of OTAs, but he was not there yesterday. Just something to be mindful of. Uche and Jennings, not there. No word why. We've got to remember that OTAs are voluntary. Maybe they just didn't want to show up the first day. We'll see. Injuries. We know about Strange. Jelani Tavai is an unknown. Don't really know what's going on. Off-season procedure. Not a ton of detail that I could find on Tavai, but he was not out there yesterday. As far as Kendrick Bourne, Greg Bedard, my buddy, wrote that Bourne did some things, but he appears to be fairly far away, perhaps sometime in camp. So I stand by what I said when we went through the offensive depth chart. I would not be surprised if Bourne begins the season on the PUP. I think it makes a lot of sense. You could see the Patriots sit Bourne for the first month of the season, make sure he's completely ready and healthy, and then bring him in week 5, work him into the wide receiver rotation, and eventually by week 7 or 8, he's a full go. Would not be surprised whatsoever if that's what happens. Some other notes. Christian Barmore mentioned more 4-man fronts and pass rush. We've talked about it. This team defensively might be more aggressive. They might actually have more 4-man defensive line setups. They want you to beat the guy opposite of you. They want as many one-on-one matchups. They want Judon one-on-one. They want Barmore one-on-one. Keon White. We can go down the line. Joshua Uche, if he is going to be playing that sub-pass rusher role, you want him on a one-on-one. So Barmore said, more pass rush, more 4-man fronts. Keep that in mind as we move along, because that could be a critical piece of information getting ready for 2024. DeMarcus Covington, Gerard Mayo, if they're going to tweak something, they might be tweaking what they do up front. They might want more natural pass rush. They might want more one-on-ones so they don't have to blitz as much. Remember, last year they blitzed a ton. They were in the top 5 when it came to blitz rate in the NFL. So this could be Covington and Mayo saying, we want to create that pressure, but we believe guys like Judon and Barmore can win their one-on-ones. That'll create at least one of those guys getting double-teamed, and that should open up the pass rush in other ways. So that's something we have to keep an eye on. A very interesting note from Barmore yesterday with the media. Marte Mapu played safety for the most part, but he did also slide in as a sub linebacker. Jalen Hawkins, according to Bedard, had lots of run at free safety. It's interesting because a lot of people would tell you that Hawkins is best playing downhill and making plays on receivers or, ball carriers. But Hawkins got lots of run at free safety. So we have to keep an eye on that. Is Jalen Hawkins maybe more part of the plan than we thought? Marcus Jones, if you're wondering, he played at safety yesterday, and he also played slot cornerback. Doesn't surprise me. I mentioned that during our defensive depth chart look last week. I think Jones could play some slot. I think Marcus Jones could play some free safety. I think they're going to utilize his flexibility and versatility in the defensive backfield to create opportunities for others. So Marcus Jones was at safety. He was at slot cornerback. So those are your OTA notes for day one. Lots to sift through. Also, lots to get through with the Cole Strange injury news. All right. We'll get to an Eastern Conference Finals preview in a minute. But if you want to support this show, one of the best things that you can do is share it on your social media and tag me. That helps get the word out. So Twitter, it's at Nick C Radio. If it's Instagram or Threads, it's at Cattles Radio. So don't forget, you want to support the show, share it on social media, tag me, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Threads. That's how we build momentum, getting ready for mandatory minicamp in about a month. All right, Eastern Conference Finals, Celtics, Pacers, have to run through this. Both teams have faced injury-laden teams. A lot of people making a big deal about the Celtics' path. I think they earned this path by being absolutely awesome during the regular season. But Boston played against a banged-up Miami, and they played eventually against a very banged-up Cavaliers team. But Indiana played against a very banged-up Milwaukee team, no Giannis, and then Dame Dollar missed the last two games of that series. And then they also played against the Knicks, and we know what happened with the Knicks. Their entire team fell apart by the end of that series. By Game 7 on Sunday, they had like nobody. Dante DiVincenzo and Precious Achua pretty much left out there. Indiana, they're going to push the pace. They're all about pace. All about the pace. All about the pace. They're all about pushing pace, getting into transition. Celtics transition defense has to be great. They had some leakage with transition defense at times, especially against Cleveland early on in that series. The C's have to be very good with their transition defense. They have to be balanced. They have to get back quickly. They've got to make sure that they attach themselves to the shooters. They can't screw around against the Pacers in transition. The Pacers are a deadly offensive team, and they get a lot of shots up. The Pacers, number one in the playoffs, shots per game. Almost 88 shots per game. That's what they do. Jay King of The Athletic wrote this. While on offense, the Pacers used less of the shot clock than any other team this season, according to Inpredictable.com. They were also the fastest-paced team after opposing buckets. They try to run in any situation. You make a bucket, they run. You miss, they run. You turn it over, they run. You get the point. As Jay King wrote, they don't simply try to shoot quickly. They run fast. They cut fast. They play fast in every way. With their pace, they can punish even the briefest moments of carelessness. I've mentioned this before, and I need to mention this even more now as we get ready for this Eastern Conference Finals. The Celtics defensively, not just in transition, but even in their half-court sets, the Celtics have to have incredible attention to detail. They cannot miss. They cannot miss back cuts. They cannot miss any of it. They have to be ready for everything and anything. When you're talking about ball screens, you got to be up, pressuring the basketball consistently. Your pickup points have to be good. You have to play with consistent force. Again, you can't get beat by backdoor cuts. You can't get beat in transition. Attention to detail. Who has who? When do they have them? If you're going to switch, like the Celtics love switching, those switches have to be efficient. They have to be communicated. They have to be damn good. If the Celtics lack attention to detail on the defensive end of the floor, Indiana will put up a $130. This series, to me, is all about the Celtics imposing their will and physicality defensively, having the attention of detail, and making sure they don't give up easy transition buckets. If you can do those things and you can limit Indiana to less than 110 points, then you're off to a great start. That's what this is all about. That's the most important thing about this series. We have the first and second overall offensive efficiency teams in the league this season playing in this series. Number one offensive efficiency, number two offensive efficiency in this season. Pacers, Celtics, those are the teams. The Pacers, paint points. Tons of paint points. They were number one in the NBA in paint points. They will continue to move the basketball. They will force you to make multiple contests. And as you're trying to close out on shots, they will take it to the bucket over and over and over again. The Celtics have to be disciplined in their closeouts. They have to be disciplined when they're contesting shots on the perimeter. If they're not, the Pacers are going to make that second move, that third move. They're going to get to the bucket, and they're going to score points. So again, discipline, attention to detail. You have to make sure that you're doing everything you've got to do against screens and their attempt on straight line drives to limit that. So you've got the Pacers, number one in paint points. You've got the Celtics, who have been great from three. But they need, say it again, they need to consistently defend. I'll go through some of the Indiana stats here offensively. Number one in regular season scoring. Number one in field goal percentage. They were the ninth best three-point shooting team. Number one in assists this year. And not only were they number one in assists, they were number 9 in fewest turnovers. So they don't turn the basketball over a ton. Indiana is a very, very good offensive team. They score a lot. They move it a lot. Ball movement, man movement. They can shoot the three. They attack you in the paint by multiple drives and kicks and multiple, swings of the ball going east, west, west, east. That's what they do. They get into transition. And in the playoffs, Indiana's offense, number one in scoring, number one in field goal percentage, number one in three-point percentage, number one in assists, second fewest turnovers per game. So they've continued to play at a high level offensively throughout this postseason. Again, I would also mention the matchups, however. Don't forget they played Milwaukee. Milwaukee was not a great defensive team to begin with. They lost Giannis, which made them even a worse defensive team. And then the Knicks, they were going to win that series on physicality and defense. Then Mitchell Robinson went down. Then OG Anunoby went down. Anunoby was really their only wing defender. So the Pacers, with their kind of offense, they really did not have to face pushback in the first two rounds. We'll see if that changes. It should change against the Celtics. The Celtics should absolutely provide that pushback defensively and make it tougher on Indiana to score points. The three-point line, Indiana number 3 this season in three-pointers made. Celtics were number 1. C's made 1.5 more threes per game than Indiana did, which will, of course, get us into the math. Joe Mazzulla is all about the math. Mazzulla wants to win at the three-point line. He wants to make more threes than you make. Because the idea is, if I outscore you plus, 15, 18, 21, whatever it is, if I outscore you at the three-point line, you have to make a hell of a lot more buckets in the paint to equal that. So you can score points in the paint. We saw this against Cleveland in Game 5. They gave Evan Mobley all the space that he wanted. They weren't even tagging on the pick and rolls. They were allowing Mobley to kill them in the paint because they said, we'll give you the twos, Mobley. We'll give you the dunks. We're coming back and we're scoring threes. So the Pacers, if they attack the paint, I think the Celtics, they won't care as much giving up points in the paint if they win that three-point battle. If they're making 4 to 5 to 6 threes more than Indiana is, you can give up some of those paint points because you're making it up on the other end from 3. So this is going to be a heavy math series, as they say. Indiana, meanwhile, defensively, they do a good job of limiting three-point attempts and three-point makes. So Indiana has to continue to do a damn good job at the three-point line, and they have to force the Celtics to try to beat them in a different way. They've got to take them from the three-point line, and they've got to say to the Celtics, you have to beat us in the paint. You've got to beat us by driving and posting up. That's what they will challenge the Celtics to do. They don't want to give up 45 threes against the Celtics and have the Celtics outscore them by 15, 18 points at the three-point line. They know that's a recipe to lose. Celtics offense, though, they should feast. Indiana, 24th defensive rating in the regular season. After the trade deadline, when they acquired Pascal Siakam, they were 19th in the league in defensive rating, 13th in defensive rating in the playoffs. Last time I checked, there are 16 teams that make the playoffs. We're not counting the play-in. So 13th out of 16 playoff teams on defensive rating. They score a ton of points in the paint, but they give up a ton of points in the paint. They were 30th in the NBA defending the paint. They were 11th in the postseason giving up paint points. And that's interesting because the Knicks, they're not really a paint-heavy team, and the Bucks didn't have Giannis. Like, comment, subscribe, rate, and review. The Pacers also foul a ton. They will send you to the free throw line a bunch. So the Pacers, they can't give up a certain amount of threes and then give up free throws. The Celtics, as easy as the Pacers can score 120, the Celtics could score 130 on this team. So the Pacers have to pick their poison. I think they'll try to shut down the three-point line, but they can't get into early foul trouble. They can't get into the bonus. They can't allow the Celtics to chew them up at the free throw line and be a plus 15, plus 20 at the stripe. That would be a disaster for them. You can't give up threes and free throws. You'd likely want to give up free throws more than you give up threes. All right, let's talk matchups. Tyrese Halliburton. Who's going to defend him? Could be Drew Holiday. Could be Derek White. I would try Holiday because Halliburton is not physically imposing. I watched him a bunch in Sacramento when I was out there working. He can hurt you from three, obviously. He can hurt you with his float game. He's very good in the pick and roll. He's very good at finding open shooters. I would have Holiday try to take that personal space away from Halliburton and physically fight him throughout this series. Try to sap him from any energy. Now, you could also do that with Derek White. I'm interested to see what they do. Who does Holiday defend? Does he defend Halliburton? Does he defend Pascal Siakam? I wouldn't be surprised if they have Holiday defend Siakam at moments. You can put Tatum on Halliburton. You can put Jaylen Brown on Halliburton. You can put White on Halliburton. So there's a lot of different things that you can do. John Corrales of Boston Sports Journal wrote about Halliburton. Halliburton, that we saw bounce Boston from the in-season tournament, has not really shown himself since the hamstring injury that he suffered against the C's. He's been a shell of himself. His scoring before the injury was 23.6 a game. Since, he dropped to 16.6 in the playoffs, 18.8. He shot almost 50% from the field prior to the hamstring injury. When he came back in the regular season, that fell to 45.5%. He has recovered in the playoffs, shooting just over 49%. And from three, he is shooting 37.5% in the playoffs. So what kind of Halliburton will you get? Will you get the consistently very good Halliburton, or will he have ebbs and flows? If Halliburton is not very good, the Celtics will blow this team out. I mean, Indiana needs Halliburton to be very good on a nightly basis in this series to win the series. They are desperate for that to happen. If you don't have it happening, you're in trouble. I think the Celtics will attack Nembhard. They will attack Halliburton defensively. Neither of those guys are great. Nembhard is smaller. You can be physical with him. I don't know who he defends. He tries to defend Derek White. Derek White can drop 30 on him. If they try to defend Drew Holiday with Nembhard, Holiday is going to take him in the point and post him all night long and make his life miserable. So I don't know. Indiana cannot hide Halliburton defensively. They cannot hide Nembhard defensively. And meanwhile, who defends Tatum and Brown? Aaron Nesmith, I think, can be annoying to those guys. I think he can bother them a little bit. Siakam is more long and athletic than he is strong. But if Tatum and Brown want to play physical, if they want to play bully basketball, they can play bully basketball against Nesmith and against Siakam. I think this is a big series for the Celtics to create threes out of post-ups and create threes out of their drive and kick game. Brown and Tatum should be able to drive and kick to the open shooters. when they have smaller guys, when they have these cross matches and you have Holiday against, Nembhard, or you have Tatum with Halliburton, get your Tookus in the paint and go to work. So I think this is a big series. Straight line drives and kicks, post-ups, draw doubles, and kicks. The Pacers will have to double the Celtics in the post almost every time. Miles Turner is the only guy that can physically deal with defending these Celtics in the post. So if they get in the paint, they're going to draw a double. And it's just being patient, and it's finding the open man. Very much like that Miami series when they throw those doubles at you. Drives and posts. I mean, Tatum against Indiana this year scored 32.5 points, had 11 rebounds, almost 6 assists. Tatum shot 58% from the floor against Indiana this year. He shot 49% from three. Tatum was 3-1 against the Pacers. So Tatum absolutely obliterated the Pacers this year. They don't have anybody that can defend him. Again, Nesmith might annoy him and bother him at times, but if Tatum is at his best and he's aggressive and he's attacking, they don't have anybody that can defend him on this team. Nobody. No one. Rebounding. Indiana struggles on the glass, 26th in defensive rebound rate, 14th in the playoffs out of 16 teams. The Celtics, meanwhile, have done a very good job rebounding. They're number 1 in the playoffs in defensive rebound rate. That could be huge. Offensive putbacks, second chance points, all of those things. Limit those. Limit those. So Indiana, not great on the glass. The C's have been very good on the glass in the playoffs. Could be a huge difference maker. Kristaps Porzingis, when will he return? He's out for the first 2 games, as we know. Do you need him? I don't think you go to Kristaps unless you're down 2-1 in Game 4, if he's ready for Game 4. I mean, if he's ready, then you could always play him, but I don't think you rush him back for any reason unless you're down 2-1. If you're down 2-0, then maybe you try to get him out there in Game 3. But I think Porzingis will take his time. And then we look at the others. You got Pritchard, Hauser, and Cornette for the Celtics. I love the Pritchard versus McConnell matchup. Very similar players, very similar play styles. They like to play fast. They like to play physical for their size. I think McConnell and Pritchard is going to be a lot of fun to watch in this series. They're going to be, getting underneath each other's skin. Nesmith brings chaos. Obi Toppin is athletic. Shepard is shooting well. So you've got to make sure that you limit and respect Indiana's bench. You don't want to give them any cheap points coming off the wood. So we'll see how that works out. And of course, home court. Celtics have had prior issues at the TD Garden. They're 4-2 this year. They've lost both Game 2s. Can they get the Game 2 monkey off their back? They've had a long layoff. Will they look sharp tonight? Got to take care of home court advantage. Indiana is 6-0 when they play at home this postseason. So, you've got to take advantage and beat Indiana in Boston because you might only get one in Indiana. So they've been really good at home. Meanwhile, they're 2-5 on the road. So you've got to take advantage. And one of those 2 wins is because they had an out-of-body experience shooting the ball against New York on Sunday. And, of course, as we know, New York was making a run. Jalen Brunson goes out in the second half with a broken hand. That game was over. So other than an out-of-body experience shooting the ball, Indiana has been bad on the road. And that was against a team in Milwaukee without Giannis and without Lillard for a couple games. And that was against New York without a number of their players. So you have to make sure you hold serve at TD Garden. You win the first 2 games, you take 1 in Indiana, you feel really good about your chances of wrapping up this series relatively soon. What's my prediction? Celtics in 6. I've got the C's in 6. I think they're more physical. I think they are better defensively, much better defensively. And I would argue when they're playing the right way, they could even be better offensively. But I'm going to go with the Celtics in 6. They get to the finals. Got to stay healthy. Let's jump into a super chat quickly. King Cato, Nick, good show. Also check out Blue Sky. I'm so much wrapped into this whole, social media thing. It's tough to keep track, man. It really is. I mostly stay on Twitter just because of how quick the information gets out there. It's tough to continue to add social media platforms. It is when you're a one-man band, but I'll try, King Cato. No promises. All right, I appreciate you. I'm out of here on this Tuesday. Back tomorrow at 11 a.m. Until then, this has been the Nick Cattle Show. Go Seas.